Say what you need to say, because if you don't, you won't get what you want. My name's Tarab. I make videos about emotional intelligence every day, and my mission today is to convince you to use those words you have in your head, but very carefully. I had a conversation, quite a few conversations, but today in particular, a difficult conversation with a colleague of mine, trying to describe essentially what I need out of them in the workplace, what type of expectations I have, how other people feel about them. These are all very, very touchy subjects when it comes to planning out our individual futures as the people giving the message, but also to plan out how our interactions with that next person are going to go. I believe a lot of kind people, a lot of compassionate people in society spend a lot of time thinking about how they feel and not too much time thinking about how they're going to convey how they feel and really the end result of what they're looking for. For instance, if I want someone to treat me differently, if I think that they're disrespecting me in some sense, the first thing that many of us would think to do is to go out of our way to be very stern and very serious. Now, if we're planning a confrontation, if we're planning a conversation, and we already have an image of us being very stuck up, very serious, very stern, saying sharp words, and we go into our interaction with that type of philosophy, then the interaction oftentimes doesn't turn out the way that we want it to. I would suggest oftentimes to listen, especially when we know that the person that we're talking to is compassionate and smart enough to understand where we're coming from if we convey the point properly. Another way to state it is always, always, always the fault of the teacher if the student is not learning. Now, many of us think to ourselves, my goodness, my children don't listen to me, my students don't listen to me, they must be the problem. They must be the issue. But where does that really get us? At the end of the day, it gets us nowhere, because the only person that you can change in this world is you, essentially the world itself. You have the ability to say to yourself that perhaps my communication style isn't appropriate for the message that I'm trying to get across. How do I improve this? This happens with time, obviously, but also observing people in difficult conversations, observing people in situations where you might think to yourself, it seems so easy the way that they do it. But it seems so easy because of years and years and years of practice, of essentially being uncomfortable. So when it comes to trying to convey our message the way that we need to the people that we care about or the people in our lives that are perhaps rubbing us the wrong way, it's very, very important to first and foremost listen to what they have to say. Make sure that you listen deeply to their concerns, perhaps why they're treating you that way. Many of us have that down pat. Arguable how deeply we're listening. The other thing that I would suggest is get a variety of perspectives. So, for instance, if a situation isn't in a microcosm, meaning it's not just you and one other person, there's other people involved, other circumstances involved, you have to think very seriously about how those people feel about the circumstances, how the environment is going to fluctuate based on the outcomes of perhaps your conversation. This might be difficult to think in the moment, especially if your emotional regulation is at a point where you get flabbergasted or saddened very easily, and that affects your day. The third thing that I would say, besides taking into account all of the different perspectives, is making sure that you realize that the best place to start is an even footing. Perhaps one of the hardest things in human life is emotional regulation. And a lot of people very high up on the food chain, people on the streets, they struggle with emotional regulation. Part of the reason why I make these videos, this channel, is to help people think through why emotional regulation is so important. Starting from that baseline, not putting judgments on that next person, not trying to take only one perspective and roll with that, but rather having a variety of perspectives that give you a better, a wiser approach to a conversation. These types of things make all of the difference in retaining talent, in retaining people on your team, in building people up, versus losing because we snapped. Grant Cardone said, "Sell or be sold." What does that mean? Sell or be sold? When we are selling something that we believe in, when we believe deeply that this thing is worth that other person's time, if we get too caught up in what that other person is trying to say, to the point where we get on their side of the argument and we forget where we're coming from, we will be sold. And oftentimes, being sold in a conversation that affects you emotionally, that affects your time, that affects your circumstances, being sold to that other person that perhaps might be manipulating those circumstances for you to be in a better or a worse state of mind, you cannot afford to be sold, my friend. It is of the utmost importance that you believe in your message and that you continue to try to get your message across as many times as it takes. Jordan Peterson also says that, listen, don't get in the mud with the swine. Probably stated it much more elegantly. But the idea is that there are some people that, regardless of how much you talk to them, regardless of all of the effort, the rhetoric that you put in, that they won't be able to understand you, and let alone make you feel quite bad of even trying to have that conversation. The swine actually enjoys rolling in the mud. So you have to be very careful. You have to pick and choose the people that you're willing to open yourself up to and actually convey deeply how you feel and how they're making you feel. Choose people that have good character around you. Choose people that are consistent around you. And it will make these conversations much, much easier. Obviously, you have to have good character and you have to be consistent in order to earn these people's time to be around you. I've said a lot. Perhaps it gives you something to think about. Tell me about a time that you've had a very difficult conversation with someone. How did it go? What were the aspects that perhaps you learned through having these difficult conversations? I've learned that the ups and downs of life are super, super important in terms of forming or contextualizing our situation. I've learned that the times that I've spent weeks in blissful happiness and enjoying everything are often the weeks that right at the end of that I hit the lowest low. And that lowest low actually contextualizes the whole time that I was enjoying myself. The things that perhaps I was missing out on. Life has a way of smiting us when we don't live it actively, when we don't live it, I suppose, aware and awake. So have those hard conversations, my friend. If you are an empath like me, if you are someone that knows that they have things to contribute to the world, but there are some people, some circumstances that are getting in your way, realize that communication is your biggest friend when it comes to circumventing those issues, or at least navigating your way through them. And that the hard conversations that you don't want to have, that you must believe in selling that other person on your viewpoint. Otherwise, you will be sold and probably not get what you deserve. Check out this video if you're curious about more communication techniques. My name is Turab. I make videos about emotional intelligence every day. Actualize your potential catalyst. This world needs you. Take care.